Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. You guys didn't bring breakfast, did you?
Already ate it. Sorry.
Well, fine. Shows your priorities, doesn't it?
That's right. Gotta eat first, then talk later.
No, that's okay. Have you ever eaten from a vending machine? You're better off eating the coins. If you're lucky. Wow, hot. So I have ice water and hot coffee. If I drink them both at the same time, do you think it'll start raining in front of me?
It could.
You never know.
You could use it.
Oh, God, I'll bet. You live in a desert. Well, since we're killing time, any singing and dancing you'd prefer to see me do? Cats. Missed it, did it last night.
Possibly will.
Len, it's hard to see you. Put on your shiny personality. Come down here.
Oh, I thought I was working at that. Listen, at 10 o'clock on Sundays is as good as you're going to get. I'm vertical. The response, wow. I've had an epiphany. Morning. Good morning, sir. I'm Len Wein. A pleasure to meet you. You can sit. Never bite.
You guys still sleeping?
Cool.
Is that nice?
It is nice.
I think the last panel of the day should get to draw on the screens over there. We have a permanent memory of how we wasted an entire weekend.
Anybody want to sing the national anthem or something?
Do we have to sing ours?
Why not?
Yeah, we know the words to that one, at least. The Bolivian national anthem. We are sorry we were born here, but that's our luck.
Well, I know something. It's a little Christmas thing that I always say, but roses are reddish and violets are bluish. If it wasn't for Christmas, we'd all be Jewish.
Boy, perfect spot.
I know. Good for you.
I didn't think Stan would be here by now.
I actually just heard that he's not coming.
You did not.
I just one of the guys that's running the show just told me he's not coming.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, let's make fun of him.
Tell us some stories that might not polite about Stan.
Oh, I could do that.
See, I mean, you're good.
You'll never work in this town again.
Well, it's okay, I don't work in this town to begin with.
I didn't know this is a comedy show.
If we play our cards right, it is.
I don't gamble.
He was up late last night with the Kevin Smith thing. I bet they were out partying.
Oh, God, his age, shame on me. Look, I'd like to have that kind of stamina now, frankly.
I heard you were partying too. If I'd known I would have stayed till 10. You went over to the party, Len.
I did. But I thought you had to go home and look at the dog.
Did you drive all the way back?
What, last night?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Here?
Yeah, keep on talk to each other.
Trust me, it makes our job much easier.
Maybe Linda could sit in for
Because she knows so much of his history.
That's right.
Gentlemen, please, tell us about history comics.
Shall I just mic the crowd?
I like that. Because you know what will happen, we'll all forget, and the entire crowd will strangle themselves on the way out.
Only two?
Well, there should be three, at least. Maybe Herb is supposed to be here.
Well, how late were y'all out partying last
I was only, I'm a party guy. I went to bed at 11.
See?
All right, well,
We'll do 4?
I'm trying to think of something smart to say. How about a little joke, okay?
Sure.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure, put that on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
How about this one,
Put
okay?
that on now.
I'm on the panel. You want?
How you doing, pal?
I survived. My alarm clock, 1,500 miles away. It's amazing. The hard part is whacking it to make it stop.
Alan, side on.
What's that?
Microphone side
Not
on.
on? I don't want to tell the joke.
Try the other one on the other side.
I'd rather we start the, why don't we just start the panel?
Okay. Can you hear me now? All right, what's the name of this panel? From the golden age to the modern age. It's sort of like the half-life of uranium. You watch everything decay over time.
Talk about when you got started and the guys that were still in the industry that were from that golden age that you got to work with.
Well, I think I can claim that from the golden age.
Yeah, absolutely. What did you do in the golden age, sir?
Well, let me introduce myself.
Please.
My name is Len Bellman, and I'm an alcohol. My wife said to me, "Don't be a clown," but when she used to call me a comedian, then it got to me. No, on a more serious note, I joined Timely previously, before it was called Marvel Comics. I was all of 18, and I saw an ad in the New York Times. They wanted someone to do backgrounds on Captain America. It was Columbus Day, 1942. Didn't he discover America at that time? No.
Yeah, he was celebrating his holiday, I think, that day.
And I said to my dad, "I'll go tomorrow, it's a holiday." And he said, "No, you go today." And we went back and forth, and he won. I went up, it was the McGraw-Hill building on 34th, something like that. I was interviewed, well, a gentleman came out by the name of Don Rico, who did the Young Allies. And he took my samples, and it was about 10 minutes later, he came out and he said, "You're hired." And I start next Monday, which I did. I came in that Monday. Is this all right for me to go ahead?
Please, for the love of God, I don't have to work that way.
That's cool.
I think we should go on a roll. Anyway, he introduced me to Sid Shores, who took over Captain America after Simon Kirby left for DC. So Don Rico introduced me to Sid Shores, and behind him sat Vince Alacia, who was an inker, who was inking Captain America Sid Shores' work. And then he introduced me to the rest of the staff, Frank Giacoya and a few other, Mike Sikowski and so forth. But I noticed there was tension in the air. There were two separate camps. It was, as far as I was concerned, it was jealousy from upon part of Don Rico, who was doing Young Guys, who I believe wanted to do Captain America, but it was given to Sid Shores. Being a new guy, well, I had to be neutral. And what can I do but, you know, play both sides. So, and, you know, keep your nose clean. And I started doing backgrounds. Frankly, I didn't really like doing that. It was ruling lines. But I was all of 18. You have to start somewhere, and I started there, and I was thankful for that. But I didn't see Stan Lee for a while. In fact, I didn't even know who my boss was.
After you meet Stan, you still don't really know who your boss is.
You're the straight man here, fella.
Hey, for what they're paying me.
We'll split it. So, it wasn't a short time after they gave me my own script, a pencil, and ink. And the first script was called The Patriot. And then they gave me other scripts. I worked on Submariner, Human Torch. Then it was War Stories. Anything Stan Lee threw at me, I did. And I'm happy to do it. But I hated to do the Western stories because I didn't like to do horses. Not that I didn't like to do horses, I couldn't draw horses. But a little research and I found horses, and I look back at these pictures of the horses that I drew and they were good. I don't know why I was so, you know, hard on myself. But we used to fake a lot of things. When the horses were running, there was smoke under the feet, so you do a lot of lines, smoke, and you hit the feet. So, but you know, I have twin granddaughters, if I may say, who are artists in Louisville. They did 3 Kentucky Derby posters. And their work is on, one of them does work on Body of Proof, was it? There's no Body of Proof, where there's a character, young girl who draws horses. Janine did the horses in the style of a 16-year-old who liked to draw horses. And she also did for Entourage, where one of the Playboys had a picture of a nude. She drew the nude, and I'll tell you, they're good. But, so where was I before you interrupted me?
I believe you were in the 3rd row.
If you take a look, there's no room in the 3rd row.
There is now.
Well, anyway, let me get back to this. And, I'll hand it over to let me hand it over to Mr. Wein right now, and then I'll get back again to what I have to say to continue. But just remember where I started, because after 50, I forget.
Sorry. No, not at all. Please, that was wonderful. I mean, there aren't that many of certainly your generation, and God help me, hardly very few left of my own, who remember those days and remember the beginning of the history of the industry. And it's important. Somebody should sit down with you in all seriousness and do a long interview on tape to record your memories.
Well, other people suggested I write a book.
Yes.
And I was going to call it Timely Confidential, because I was there and I've seen a lot of things. And working for Stan was great. I'm so sorry he's not here right now. I saw him this morning in a restaurant. There's a restaurant, and how many of you are at the Hyatt Hotel? You notice the name of the restaurant there? The name of the restaurant?
Yeah, Fork.
Yeah, Q.
I'm frankly not sure I really needed the restaurant to get
This is the
stolen.
truth. So we're going to open up a branch and call it 4Q2. I don't know how the hell I get away with it, but I had to like kind of look a couple of times. Service is lousy there though.
Yeah, but the food's terrible. So that was just out.
Well,
Actually, the food's
I went in this morning and all I wanted was cereal. There was Stan with one of his entourage, and I thought Stan would be here, but I understand from what I've been told that a personal problem.
He's still working on his coffee.
No, he finished the coffee, and what he left over, I finished.
God. Hate to see
No,
you throw
not
the
really.
waste.
No, but I was there, and I feel pretty good about that. They say I'm the only one alive from the era of the 1940s of Captain America. I remember Stan had this Uncle Robbie Solomon, who was a brother-in-law to Martin Goodman, the publisher. And Robbie Solomon, I thought, was the boss. Actually, they told me he was a hat salesman who was hired to work. Nobody really knew his place, but boy, he made our lives miserable. He'd come in and say, draw like McRaboy or Lou Fine, who were very fine artists in those days. Meantime, Goodman's books were outselling DC and every other comic book being published. It was really, he just had a little power as a short man, and he used to get on my back. And I was taking it pretty personal. I was green, 18 years old, you know, and I loved to draw. And I happened to meet Joe Simon, 207, and I mentioned Robbie Solomon to him. He said, yeah, I hated the guy too. This is what Joe Simon told me. He said he used to get on my back, so I didn't feel so bad, you know. I mean, but in a way, he helped me, Robbie Solomon. May rest in peace, because he died. Well, I don't like to wish that on anybody, except the people I don't like. But after he passed away, actually Stan took over, because my vision of Stan, I didn't even know who he was. Nobody gave me an introduction to anybody, you know. It was like a do-it-yourself job. But after Robert Solomon passed away, Stan took over. And let me tell you something. To me, Stan Lee, and he treated me pretty good, is the godfather of the comic book industry. He did it with a typewriter, a legitimate typewriter, not the ones the wise guys use. And what took you so long to laugh?
We were waiting for his comment.
No, but he is. I'm so sorry he isn't here, because I really wanted to stand up and pay tribute to him. He treated me wonderfully. I mean,
Damn it, early werewolves.
if you got to leave the room, go ahead. But Stan was an okay guy to work for, but you couldn't fool him. I had one panel with a cup of coffee. Well, it wasn't coffee, it was a cup. And next panel, that cup was gone. And he said, what happened to the cup? I says, the waitress took it away. He didn't buy it. But he always treated me fairly, and, well, I tell you, I am now married for the second time. I've married my first wife, and that was not really a good marriage, and I had a lot of problems. In In fact, if I was still married to that woman today, I'd be dead. No, this is the truth. She buried 2 husbands after me. Yeah.
And they worth it.
And a guy said to me, a friend, he says, how'd you escape? I says, I didn't eat the mushrooms. But she did bury 2 husbands, but she's still alive and well. Bygones are bygones. Well, I pulled a knife out of my back.
You gotta have a lot of stamina to be able to actually bury 2 husbands at her age.
You didn't know her. I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you. One time, we had radio at those days, and I like to listen to Danny Kaye on the radio because he was a neighborhood young man who made good. Well, you see that friggin' fruit bowl come to my head. Open my head because I changed the station. If I said I was still married, I'd be dead.
Yeah, sounds like it.
But I want to introduce you to my wife today. We were just married 50 years.
Wow.
And stand up, Ross, please. She's a celebrity in her own right. She had her own radio program in Asbury Park, WJLK, the voice of the Asbury Park Press. And I'd like to tell you a little story about her. She was on the board of the Jewish Community Center, and the kids came to her, they wanted to put on a dance, and they had $200, and they needed $200 more to borrow from the board to make this dance, and they said we'd pay back the board that night. And Ross said, well, why don't you take the $200 band instead of the $400 band? They said, no, this band will bring them in from Freehold and Red Bank, which are neighboring towns. She got them to $200. And I was a chaperone. I was getting kids out of the closet. Hey, you out, you know. I don't know what the hell I was smoking, but it smelled bad. And this guy played the music. And I wanted to tell him at the dance, I was going to say to him, hey, keep it down like I do in my house. In my house, I shut the radio off. No, my daughter didn't throw a fruit bowl at me, but the thing is, that man was Bruce Springsteen. And wait, the story is not over. Prior to the dance, they asked my wife to interview Bruce Springsteen for a radio program called Point of View. And guess what she did after she recorded it? Can anybody guess what she did to that tape? She erased it. I didn't let her back in the house for 2 years. No, at that time, we didn't know. I'll tell you another story. I remember when I finished a story while I worked on staff and knocked on Stan's door and I brought it in. And there was a GI standing there and a crew cut haircut. And Stan introduced me, Alan, I want you to meet Mickey Spillane. Mickey, I want you to meet Alan Bellman. Another writer, you know, shook his hand. And then Stan gave me a script called, you really shouldn't say this now, called Jack Buster Johnson. We can't use the word Jap anymore. But they did kill Americans, so. Anyway, I did the script. After you pencil it, you ink it. So what do? The script is laying on there. You take the brush, you dip it in the ink, and then you take the excess ink off the script. I should know that Mickey Spillane would become an author of a book called I, the Jury, become a movie actor himself playing Mike Hammond's TV. So I apologize to my wife because I did a boo-boo. But we don't know what the future brings, who the people are. And I like to say this, that I don't know where, see, they never asked us to return the script. So we threw the script away and go, like I say, you know, you'll figure, look at Stan. He was the kid from the 5 corners or 4 corners of Long Island. But he made Marvel Comics. He and he himself. There is no other person in the comic book industry could stand up. Carmine Infantino, who I work with, got a job at DC. He didn't last very long. I don't know what happened. But Stan did it. He did it his way. He knew how to put a book out. Stanley Presents. He was a showman. And I said to him last year in Orlando, I said, Stan, when are you going to take it easy? He says, Alan, if I take it easy, I'll fall apart. He has inspired me. I just turned 88.
Wow.
What do you mean, wow?
That's a nice round number.
I played it, didn't come out. But all I can say to you, it's been a wonderful life. I'm back in the field. I love to come to conventions. I'm headed, God willing, for next week for Denver. I have family there. I hope to meet my good friend Michael Uslan, the executive producer of Batman, who I know for a long time. His dad and I were in the Lions Club, and when we lived in New Jersey, Michael, when his father told me he knew me, when he wrote in an article, he went mad, berserk. He loves comics, Michael Uslan. And there's new one, The Dark Knight Rises, should be, and I hope a winner, as the Avengers were for Marvel. And this is about as far as I'm going to go with my little speech, and I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Wein, please, and I thank you for your interest in.
There are similarities to our stories. I also started at about 18 in the business. I had been a comic book fan, and from the time I was 7 years old, I was sick and I was in the hospital. My father brought me a whole batch of comic books to keep me occupied. And I got hooked. I said, I want to be in the comic book business. I started at DC as opposed to Marvel, although I ended up at Marvel for a long time. DC used to give a tour every Thursday afternoon. A nice man named Walter Hurlichek would take whoever happened to be in the lobby, sometimes dragging them against their will, on a tour of the DC offices to show everybody what could be and how the books were produced. And I had a dear friend at the time who skipped school with me at least one Thursday a month. We would skip school and go to take the tour. So by the time I started submitting samples of stuff I wanted to do, they knew me. They know you again. Every month, here you are. And so it was an air of familiarity. And my friend and I wanted to be the artist. In 8th grade, my art teacher said, I had drawn a picture of a shark, and my art teacher said, you show actual artistic promise. At which point I said, I want to be a comic book artist. And so I majored in art for all of high school and college. And we brought in the samples my friend had written and I had drawn. And Joe Orlando was the editor at the time. And Joe looked at the pages, took them back to his office to study them. And about 15 minutes later came back and said, well, the artwork's still missing a few things, it's not quite there. But I really like the writing. If you guys would like to submit stories to a book he was doing called House of Mystery, at the time I'd love to see what you have. So all of a sudden I was a writer. You know, I figured, I can't get in as an artist, I'll get in as a writer. And I submitted a half dozen story ideas, and Joe bought 3 or 4 of them, and suddenly I'm a writer for a living. I mean, I was willing to staple the books if that's what would get me into the business, but I've been in it ever since. Started at DC doing a bunch of mysteries and in other genres that don't exist anymore. I wrote hot rod comics for them, and westerns and romance, and a whole range of books that really don't get published much anymore. And then there was a problem. Original art was being stolen by somebody on staff, and since my partner and I were the only two young guys there that they assumed cared at all about the art. We got fired for stealing it, which we had not done. My partner left the business at the time for a while and became an art teacher out on Long Island, Lake Ronkonkoma, one of the great names ever. And that was way out. He just gave up the business. And I went down the block to Gold Key Comics, which is where they were publishing at the time. Gold Key, which had been Dell, and is now a whole other brand. And I went in, I met the two lovely young, by now young, by then older gentlemen, Wally Green, who was the editor-in-chief, and his assistant, Paul Kuhn. And I made an appointment, and I came in with some stories I'd written, and I said, "Hi, it's nice to meet you, gentlemen." And they said, "Well, why are you here, young man?" And I said, "Well, I'd like to write for you guys." And they looked at each other, and then they looked at me, and they said, "In God's name, why?" And I said, "Well, I like your books. You're local. You produce material that's interesting to me, and I'm a writer, and since I can't find writing elsewhere, you're it. You win." And they tried me out, and they loved me. And I wrote for them for the next 3 or 4 years, to the point where I'd gotten exonerated. My partner and I, they had found a real thief at DC, and my partner and I were exonerated and allowed back to write for them. And my DC rate finally became so much higher than the rate I was making at Gold Key, I had to leave. And with their blessing, which was one of the sweetest things they ever thought, they said, "No, you can't afford to work for us anymore. Go work where you can get some money." And they asked me, if please go be successful. We'd feel terrible if we held you back. And so that's what happened. I went back to DC, started writing for them on a regular basis, worked for a couple of years there, and got stolen by Marvel by accident, which I always find one of the weirdest stories. Jerry Conway, who wrote Spider-Man and a lot of the major Marvel books after Roy Thomas, was my roommate. We were sharing an apartment. And
Roy Thomas?
No, Jerry Conway. Jerry now lives out here. Gave up comics many years ago to become a television writer. But at the time, he was the second regular writer on Spider-Man after Stan and a number of the other titles. And what they would do was every time Jerry would move up on a book and leave another one, he'd come to me and say, "Hey, I'm giving up Marvel Team Up," which was a Spider-Man book. "Interested in writing it?" And I go, "Oh God, yeah, sure, write Spider-Man." So I took the book, which meant I had to give up a book at DC I was writing because there's only so much time in the day. And he did this to me over and over. And one morning I woke up and realized, I'm working for Marvel. I don't know how this happened, because I had been working for DC 2 months earlier. But I stayed there for a while. I got hired by Roy as his assistant editor, and then 6 months later, when he moved up the ladder, I became editor-in-chief of Marvel. I was 25 at that time, and I was running the company. 57 titles a month.
Stan was only 20 when he became editor of Marvel.
I know, and Stan still did it better than any of us. I mean, he was a master of that stuff. Every so often, and not too often, but every so often I would have a problem. A title I couldn't solve, a balloon placement I couldn't solve. Stan never had the problem. I mean, he'd look at the thing, go, boom, that's the answer. And he was always right. I mean, my favorite is when Jerry was writing Spider-Man, and he created the guy in the black suit with the big skull head chest, and who killed all kinds of criminals, and we had no title. We couldn't think of a name to call him. And we went into Stan and said, "Stan, we've got this brand new character named John Romita had drawn the costume, and he looks great, and we don't know what to call him." And Stan instantly said, "So what does he do?" He says, "Well, he kills mobsters and stuff. He punishes the guilty." And Stan says, without missing a beat, "Well, then he's the Punisher." And we all kind of went, Of course he's the Punisher. I mean, but that's what Stan would do. He would right to the core instantly.
I have the Punisher PCAP, by the way. If I knew you were here, I would have brought it. It's really... Sorry to interrupt you.
That's quite all right. I am frankly thrilled to be on this panel with you. I love meeting people who have been in this business longer than I have, and there aren't that many anymore.
Don't remind me. I'm sorry.
No, please go.
People come over to me and they say, "Gee, Alan, you look great." I go, "Gee, I don't like canaries. In other words, if I look great to you, keep it to yourself.
Well, in that case, that one, you really look lousy.
I'm not too crazy about you either.
You know what might be a good idea? Let's open this up to questions.
Great. Glad I thought of it.
Me too. I don't know what I would have done without you. Anyway, and if you don't, what the hell are you doing in this room? Yes, back there. I started in '68. There was a '68. I remember the '60s, one of those sad cases. My first work, my ex-partner, the one I talked about, is Marv Wolfman, who's gone off certainly to an adequate career of his own. But we did a story for a magazine called Castle of Frankenstein, where they paid us $25 cash and 25 copies of the magazine. But it was still our first professional sale. Just a couple of months before I started working for DC. I'm sorry? Not well.
Thank
never
God.
Really? I do sketches now and again, mostly for somebody much more talented than I to actually finish up. But it does make it easy to write the scripts because I can see everything on my head. So being an artist gave me an edge in that department, I think.
If I may interject,
Please.
I wanted to be a writer. Really?
Well, we can trade if you
No,
like.
no, I'm happy where I am now. But I didn't want to write. In fact, I joined a little amateur newspaper club. And I used to go out to New Jersey, Jersey City, where I lived in Brooklyn, and a bunch of little kids there when they printed little small newspapers. But it was easier than going to college. Thank you, Mr. Wein.
It's easier than working for a living. I have managed to fall into an industry where, for 45 years now, I've never had to wear a tie to work. I like that part.
Well, I tell you, I like to tie one on once in a while.
That's got nothing to do with ties.
This tie I have here is a gift from a fan. If I may stand up.
That's a great
Very
tie.
proud of it.
Yeah. Very.
And I don't drink.
Oh, in that case, it's Spider-Man.
You know, it's been, they've brought me back now. How many years, Roz?
9.
9? 10 years, 9. I was working, when I moved to Florida, I worked for the Sun Sentinel in the art department. And after being there for about 10 years, I went into photography and I was winning prizes because of my art background. I knew composition and so forth. But one day I received a call from a dentist in New York by the name of Dr. Michael Vasallo. And he asked me if I was the Alan Bellman that worked for Timely Comics. I said, yeah. He said, I've been looking for you. And I began a wonderful relationship, friendship. He brought me back into the comic book industry, where I now draw for the fans all over the world. They know me. And believe me, I never thought this little 18-year-old kid sitting in front of Carl Burgos and Mike Sikowski and all these guys. Mike Sikowski is gone, but he was a wonderful artist with a very bad attitude.
One of the first professional artist I met as a young boy was Mike. He actually lived in my neighborhood, next door to my aunt.
There goes the neighborhood.
That was kind of it. But she talked him into, knowing that I was a comic book fan, she talked Mike, this is before there was a comics fandom, into letting my buddies and I come by to say hello one afternoon. So I spent an afternoon, and years later I worked with Mike a lot. But
Mike was a wonderful artist. He was all of 18. And all I did is watch him. He'd sit back like this. How the hell did he get the drawing done? I don't know what he did draw. And then there was Al Jaffe who went to Mad Magazine. Oh, his hobby was giving people hot foot. You know the hot footer? Yeah, the truth. You know, you creep under, you put a match in it by the soul, light up. He'd do Ziggy Seal and Ziggy Pig, and how the hell did he ever get his work done? You know what I mean? We had two rooms. We had the illustrator's room, and we had the animator's room. And the animator's room, they were crazy as bedbugs. I sat near the window one time. I looked out, there was an animated figure they made up, and they were working it from their window. The friggin' thing was moving. But is there anyone else with some more questions, please? I got two here. Let me, the lady, and I'll get you after. Yes, ma'am.
When Frederick Wortham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, came out, was there a ripple through the office? Did it come on slow? Where you realized this was going to affect
They called
the industry?
911 for me. No, that knocked us out for a while. It knocked me out. There was no work to be done. I met my lovely wife. Now, how the hell are you going to court a woman when you don't have a job, you know? But we worked together. She had one street corner, I had the other. No reality. You know, life has a way. I'm not a religious person, I'm not a holy roller, but I believe. Right now I have a son in hospital in Utah, in Houston, who had a, what is it called?
Ruptured aorta.
Aorta, which tore open, but he lived alone. He's been divorced 3 times. And a man came in to buy his house. If that man was not there, he would have died. And I pray a lot for him. He's given me a little heartache during our years, but I prayed a lot. And I'm not giving you no sermon now. But boy, you gotta believe, because for that man, an angel sent him. I don't see angels. I don't walk on water. I don't hear voices. But I just had to tell this to you, I believe. Okay, gentlemen here now.
Hi there. First of all, I want to thank you both for coming out. Speaking as a fan, I always appreciate it when an artist or a writer or anybody from any generation in any company comes out and shares their insights. And in your talking, both of you alluded to the fact that there are certain genres that were popular years and years ago, like westerns and hot rod magazines, that just aren't really wanted as much anymore. We're kind of in the spandex superhero phase, and I just want to ask you both if you think that that's been a positive change or a negative change over the years.
Can I take this one?
Can you say that again?
I was asking if you, what you think of the fact that the westerns and war stories are not as popular today as they used to be.
Well, you know, is it all right if I answer?
Go. I'll follow you up.
I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
I better.
I mean, I'm sorry, I apologize to you. It's just, I don't know what's going on in the comic book industry today. The drawings are beautiful. Don't tell me it is a computer. Someone had to draw it. The quality of artwork today is much better than when I started. We were young guys. You look back. You can look back at Kirby's work. I have several books of Kirby. His work was crude. Nobody starts off drawing like Michelangelo. And speaking of Michelangelo, we were in Italy several years ago and looked up at his paintings. 400 years, it was still good. I paint my house, next year I gotta paint it again. But I really can't give you an honest answer of today's happening. They're good work, beautiful work. So, can you give him a better answer?
I hope so. We'll find out. I think it's to the detriment of the industry. I've always thought so. First and foremost, a lot of these different genres taught you to do different kinds of storytelling. Taught you, I mean, the romance books where there was no action ever, taught you to do 7 or 8 pages of human interaction, of romance, of people talking, of people doing things. That it's the least exciting part, technically, of the job. You know, 2 guys punching each other out is much more exciting than a guy walking hand in hand down the block with his girl. But they learned elements of storytelling that they don't get the opportunity to learn anymore. You know, I wrote hot rod comics early in my career. I didn't have a driver's license yet, but it forced me to sit down and do research. And so I did. And that's another thing you don't get much of these days is research. People who check things out to make sure the costumes are correct in period pieces and the machinery is correct in other kinds of series. It was a wider, more interesting industry when I started out, and certainly when he had all those great years doing what he did. Now there are people who only know how to draw superheroes. Only superheroes. I mean, some of them can't even draw people in their normal street clothes out of the superhero suit. And it's a loss to the industry. I think people need to be able to work on anything. You know, guys like Gil Kane was magnificent. Talk about drawing horses. Gil could draw horses like nobody's business. He understood because he knew he'd be drawing westerns. He borrowed several books of horse anatomy from the library and practiced and practiced and practiced until he knew what a horse moved like, what made it move, where the muscles were. Sometimes he would turn in pencils and the horse would be in literally muscular form. There was no flesh on the body yet, but he knew where to put all those muscles, so when he tightened it up, it was right. And I think that kind of thing is lost. Well, not lost, but missing. Somebody misplaced it. I suggest checking behind the refrigerator. It's very
You know, it's a funny thing. A young man came to my table, and he's an artist, and he asked me to look at a figure he copied of Captain America, and he wanted advice. And I told him, don't copy comic book characters. Learn to draw. Learn to draw anatomy, a finger, an eye, copy, even trace. This was given to me by a gentleman I worked with so many years ago by the name of Tom Tomash. He did The Wizard and several other. He was an artist. And that's advice. And I gave this to the young man. He was copying all kind of villains. I said, you're not getting anywhere. You're not learning. You're not accomplishing anything. So afterwards,
we're being represented by the number 5 today. Next week on Sesame Street, the letter R.
who the hell is she?
She's a very lonely woman who runs around holding up numbers, hoping people will understand what she's trying to say.
Well, she got my number. I'm sorry, where were we?
I've lost track entirely. My name's Len, a pleasure to meet you.
My name is Jack Kirby. Oh,
Wait a minute. I actually grew up at the feet of Jack Kirby. He lived in my neighborhood, and Mike Sikowski tried to get rid of those fans I talked about, kids. Said, you know, I got a neighbor down the block named Frank Giacoya. He'd love to meet you guys.
I remember Frank well.
I did too. I worked with Frank a lot of times over the years. And so Frank put us on to Jack to get rid of us so he could work. And Jack, just Jack, he didn't push us off on anybody. He said, come in, kids. And every Saturday, my friend Marv and I would bike over to his house, and we'd sit at his feet, literally at his feet, watching him draw. And Roz, God rest her, would give us milk and cookies.
Yeah.
Because we were 13 years old. But I knew Jack most of my life. The most astonishing artist I'd ever seen. He drew as if he were projecting it from his head.
You know, you draw from your heart, actually. From your heart. I draw now for the fans. I take commissions. I don't do it for the money. I do, well, I hope we're not putting anybody to sleep here.
Anybody who's asleep, please don't raise your hand.
Sorry, sir. Let's do what, can we do a dance or something?
Not well, but hell, I can try it.
Kirby is known as king of the comics. He always will be king of the comics. I'm here because the fans wanted me. When I get a letter saying, your art made me happy, that makes me happy.
That's the best present you can get.
The money is secondary. It's just to keep my professional standing and buy new toys. Like a television set and an iPad that's laying there not doing nothing.
Jack was doing Captain America in Tales of Suspense at one point. And there's a famous splash page where Steve Rogers is in the middle of an airport. He's in the airport, and he's got an attaché case with him where the shield is hidden, of course. How else do you get it on the airplane? And it's an amazing shot. There are people walking in front of him. There are people walking behind him. Behind them, there are these huge glass windows like at any airport where you see planes coming in and landing, and all this is going on in one shot. He did not lay that shot out. I watched him draw that. He started at the upper left-hand corner and just drew to the bottom right-hand corner until he was done. It was all in his head. 5 layers of action and perfect. No layout.
I always tip my hat to who I feel a man is great. And he was great. It's too bad that he had to leave us at an early age.
Yes, broke my heart.
And his wife, his name was Roz, also died shortly after. But, you know, I think back, I can visualize every face that I work with. Frank Giacoya. We talked to Mike Sikowski. I'd like to tell a little story, if I may. What the hell was that 5 for?
We had 5 minutes left. That was just a 5-minute warning. If this were basketball, it
Why
would be
don't you
something
go
different.
like this?
Listen, in this crowd, I wouldn't have anybody do that.
You know, I don't know if many of you watch Bill O'Reilly on Fox News. He's doing a vaudeville act with,
Boy, is he ever.
what's his name? Oh, Miller. How about us doing an act, you know, we can go from convention to convention.
I like it. You want to be frick or you want to be frack?
What's your language?
I checked, they're all adults. So.
No, let me say, I want to thank all of you for coming out. I'm really sorry Stan is not here.
Heartbroken. I haven't done a panel at Stan in years. I was really looking forward to it.
I was looking forward to it because it was a dream come true for me, and I saw him this morning in a restaurant, and I looked him straight in the eye. I said, Stan, this means a lot to me. And he said, kill him or something like that. He probably knew himself, he may not. I don't know, they told me some personal
I'm
things.
sorry to hear that.
Well, but let me say, and I want to say to you, thank you for being here, too.
Oh, thank you.
This was fun.
You guys did great.
Thank you. Because without your approval, we're nowhere. No, really, seriously, thank you very much.
And let me say,
These are always intimidating on some level.
let's be nice to each other. We cannot be everybody's friend, but let's try. And God bless you all, and thank you, and have a great day and a great life.